The champagne flute slipped from Willa Kennedy's hand the moment she saw him walk through the door, and though she caught it just in time, her heart continued its free fall. Earth to Willa. Her best friend Sophie nudged her shoulder, laughing. "You good? You look like you just saw a ghost." Willa couldn't form words. The man standing in the doorway of Sophie's parents' sprawling estate was easily 6'3", with dark hair that looked deliberately messy in that way only certain men could pull off. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Willa's monthly rent, and his presence seemed to fill the entire room despite him having just arrived. She had seen photos of Sophie's older brother before, but those pictures had done absolutely nothing to prepare her for the real thing. "That's Zachary," Sophie said, following Willa's gaze. "My brother finally decided to grace us with his presence. He's been in London for like 3 years. Honestly, I'm shocked he came home for Dad's birthday." Willa watched as Zachary Emerson moved through the crowd, greeting his parents with what looked like genuine warmth despite the formal setting. His father clapped him on the back while his mother fussed over him, clearly thrilled to have her son home. "You never told me your brother looked like that," Willa managed, taking a large sip of champagne. Sophie rolled her eyes. "Please don't. Every single one of my friends says the same thing when they meet him. He's arrogant, workaholic, and completely emotionally unavailable. Trust me, you're better off admiring from afar." But Willa couldn't stop staring. There was something magnetic about him, something that went beyond just physical attractiveness. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, confident without being cocky, or the way his eyes scanned the room like he was calculating a dozen things at once. Those eyes landed on her, and Willa felt her stomach flip. "Sophie." His voice was deep, warm, nothing like the cold businessman Sophie had described. He crossed the room toward them, and Willa suddenly felt underdressed in her simple black cocktail dress, even though she had felt perfectly fine in it 10 minutes ago. "Zach." Sophie hugged her brother, and Willa noticed how his entire demeanor softened when he wrapped his arms around his little sister. "When did you get in?" "Few hours ago. Came straight here." His gaze shifted to Willa, questioning. "This is my best friend, Willa Kennedy," Sophie said. "Willa, this is my brother Zachary, the one I've been complaining about for years." "You've been complaining about me." Zachary extended his hand, and when Willa took it, she felt electricity shoot up her arm. His grip was firm, his hand warm, and he held her gaze for just a moment longer than necessary. "Constantly," Willa said, finding her voice, though she failed to mention several key details. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "All bad, I'm sure." "Absolutely terrible," Willa agreed, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh. "Okay, you two are not allowed to team up against me," Sophie said, but she was grinning. "Come on, Dad's about to cut the cake." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Willa tried to focus on the party, on celebrating Sophie's father's 60th birthday, but she kept finding herself watching Zachary. He seemed to command attention without trying, drawing people to him like moths to a flame. She learned from eavesdropping that he ran some kind of international investment firm, that he'd made his first million before he was 25, and that he was now worth considerably more than that. None of that mattered to Willa. What mattered was the way he'd looked at her, like she was the most interesting person in the room. She was standing on the terrace, getting some air when she heard footsteps behind her. "Escaping the party." Zachary's voice made her jump. "Just needed a breather. These heels are killing me." She gestured down at her feet, immediately feeling stupid. Why was she talking about her shoes? "Mind if I join you?" He didn't wait for an answer, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "Sophie talks about you constantly, you know." "She does. Every time I call, Willa this, Willa that." "She credits you with getting her through architecture school." Willa smiled, touched, We got each other through it. I wouldn't have survived without her either. What do you do now? I'm a restoration architect. I work on preserving historical buildings, making sure they maintain their integrity while being updated for modern use. She waited for his eyes to glaze over, the way most people's did when she talked about her work. Instead, his expression became more animated. That's fascinating. There's a building in London, this old textile factory from the 1800s. They converted it into lofts, but they kept all the original brickwork and the industrial fixtures. Every time I walked past it, I thought about the kind of skill that must take. They talked for an hour. About architecture, about London, about his work and hers. Willa learned that he'd started his company from nothing, that he'd taken risks that terrified him, that he loved what he did but missed home more than he'd expected. She told him about growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, about falling in love with old buildings when her grandmother took her to see Victorian houses when she was 7, about the satisfaction of bringing something forgotten back to life. Willa, Sophie's voice called from inside. I'm getting tired. You ready to go? Reality crashed back. Willa had carpooled with Sophie and disappointment flooded through her at the thought of leaving. I can drive you home, Zachary offered, if you want to stay a bit longer. I don't want to impose. You're not. His eyes held hers. I'd like to keep talking to you. Sophie appeared on the terrace, looking between them with an expression Willa couldn't quite read. You guys good. Zach offered to drive me home, Willa said. If that's okay with you. For a moment, Sophie looked like she might object, then she shrugged. Sure, just text me when you get home. She hugged Willa, then pointed a finger at her brother. Be nice to her. She's important to me. I'm always nice, Zachary protested. Liar. But Sophie was smiling as she left. They stayed on the terrace for another hour, then moved to the garden when Willa mentioned loving the old oak trees. Zachary told her stories about climbing those trees as a kid, about the treehouse his father had built that still existed somewhere in the branches. Willa shared memories of her own childhood, of scraped knees and summer adventures. Finally, as the party began to wind down, Zachary led her to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes, and they spent every second talking. About everything and nothing. About dreams and fears and the strange feeling of being exactly where you were supposed to be. He parked outside her building, a converted brownstone in a decent neighborhood she could just barely afford. Thank you for the ride, Willa said, not moving to get out of the car. Thank you for the conversation. Zachary turned to face her. Can I see you again? Her heart leaped. I'd like that. Tomorrow, dinner. Tomorrow's perfect. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and Willa's breath caught. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, but instead he smiled and said, Text me your address. I'll pick you up at 7. She practically floated into her apartment. The next morning, reality set in. Willa stared at her phone, at Sophie's name in her contacts, and felt guilt twist in her stomach. She needed to tell her best friend that she was going on a date with Zachary. It was the right thing to do. She called Sophie while making coffee. Hey, did you have fun last night? Sophie sounded cheerful, no hint of concern in her voice. I did. Listen, I need to tell you something. Okay, your brother asked me out. We're having dinner tonight. Willa held her breath, waiting for the explosion. Silence stretched between them. Then Sophie sighed. I figured that might happen. I saw the way you two were looking at each other. Are you mad? No, maybe a little worried. Willa, I love you and I love my brother, but Zach is complicated. He doesn't do relationships. He's married to his work. I don't want to see you get hurt. It's just dinner. With you, it's never just dinner. You fall hard and fast, and Zach is the kind of guy who'll break your heart without meaning to. Willa felt defensive despite knowing Sophie was just looking out for her. Maybe he's different than you think. Maybe. Sophie didn't sound convinced. Just be careful, okay? And if he does anything to hurt you, I'll kill him myself. That pulled a laugh from Willa. Deal. After they hung up, Willa tried to focus on work. She had a project deadline looming, a proposal for restoring a 1920s theater that desperately needed saving. But her mind kept drifting to Zachary, to the sound of his laugh, to the way he'd looked at her in the moonlight. She spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing an outfit for dinner. Too casual felt wrong, but too formal felt like she was trying too hard. She finally settled on a deep green dress that hugged her curves and made her hazel eyes look almost emerald. Zachary arrived exactly at 7, holding a bouquet of peonies. "How did you know these are my favorite?" Willa asked, stunned. "I texted Sophie. Hope that's not cheating. It's perfect." She put the flowers in water, then grabbed her purse. "Where are we going? You'll see." He took her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a neighborhood she'd never explored. The owner greeted Zachary by name, led them to a private table in the back, and winked at Willa like they were sharing a secret. "You come here often?" Willa asked as they settled into their seats. "My family used to come here every Sunday when I was growing up. Marco, the owner, he's known me since I was 8 years old and stealing breadsticks." "Did you just admit to being a breadstick thief?" "A reformed one. I pay for them now." The food was incredible, but Willa barely tasted it. She was too focused on Zachary, on the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, on the stories he told about his childhood and his travels. He asked about her family, and she found herself opening up in ways she usually didn't. "My parents divorced when I was 12, she admitted over tiramisu. "It was messy. Dad remarried quickly, started a new family. I see him once or twice a year now, mostly out of obligation. Mom's great, but she worries too much. I'm an only child, so all her focus is on me. That must be hard. Sometimes, but it made me independent. Made me learn to rely on myself." She paused. "What about you? You seem close with your family." "I am. Leaving for London was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I needed to prove I could build something on my own without my father's name opening doors." He looked down at his plate. "Coming back feels strange, like I'm a different person than the one who left. Are you?" "Different? Yes and no. I've accomplished what I set out to do. The company's successful, we've got offices in 5 countries, and last year we managed investments worth over $2 billion. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was talking about the weather. But I forgot what it felt like to have roots, to have people who knew me before I became Zachary Emerson, CEO. Willa reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "Sophie knows. Your parents know. And you're getting to know me." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I like that. I like that you don't care about the money or the company. You just see me." "I see someone pretty amazing," Willa said softly. The moment hung between them, charged and intimate. Then Zachary paid the bill despite Willa's protests, and they walked out into the warm summer night. "Want to go for a walk?" he asked. They ended up at a small park, walking along paths lit by old-fashioned street lamps. Zachary told her about deals gone wrong and lessons learned. Willa shared stories about buildings she'd saved and ones she'd lost. They sat on a bench overlooking a pond, and Willa realized she'd never felt this comfortable with someone so quickly. "I should probably get you home," Zachary said eventually, though he didn't move. "Probably," Willa agreed, not moving either. He turned to her, and this time when he reached for her, she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Then Willa's hand slid into his hair and his arm wrapped around her waist, and the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably tell you something," he said. "What?" "I'm only in town for 2 weeks. I have to go back to London." Willa's heart sank, but she tried not to let it show. "Okay. But I don't want this to be just 2 weeks. I don't know how to make it work, but I want to try. So do I." They kissed again, and Willa let herself believe that somehow they'd figure it out. The next 2 weeks were a blur of stolen moments. Zachary was busy with meetings, handling business from across the Atlantic, but he made time for Willa every single day. Coffee before work. Lunch when she could get away from the office. Dinners that stretched late into the night. Stolen kisses in his car. Long conversations on her couch. They went to a baseball game, and Willa discovered Zachary was intensely competitive and possibly the loudest fan in the stadium. He took her to an art gallery opening and watched with amusement as she geeked out over the architectural details of the building. She introduced him to her favorite bookstore, and he bought 6 novels based on her recommendations. He took her sailing, and she pretended not to notice that he was terrible at it. Sophie was supportive but cautious. She invited them both to brunch one Sunday, and Willa could see her friend studying them, trying to figure out if this was real or just a summer fling. "You're serious about her," Sophie said to Zachary when Willa excused herself to use the restroom. "I am." "Zach, you live in London. Your entire life is there. What happens when you leave?" "I'm working on that." When Willa came back to the table, Sophie gave her a long look, then nodded like she'd made a decision. "Okay, I approve. But if you hurt each other, I'm staying out of it." "Fair enough," Zachary said. Time moved too fast. Suddenly there were only 3 days left, then 2, then 1. Willa tried not to think about it, tried to just be present, but the weight of his impending departure hung over everything. On his last night, Zachary took her to his family's estate. His parents were out for the evening, Sophie was at a work event, and they had the place to themselves. He made dinner, pasta with homemade sauce that was surprisingly delicious, and they ate on the terrace where they'd first talked. "Come with me," he said as they were cleaning up. "Where?" "London. Come with me." Willa's hands stilled in the soapy water. "Zach, I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other 2 weeks, but I can't stop thinking about you. I don't want to do long distance for months or years. I want you there with me. I have a job, a life. My mom is here, Sophie is here. I know, and I'm not asking you to give all that up forever. Just come try it. 6 months. If you hate it, if we don't work, you come home. But if it's good, if this is as real as I think it is, then we figure out the rest together." Willa wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being wanted to say yes, but fear held her back. "That's a huge risk. You're worth the risk." "We're worth the risk." He took her hands, pulling her close. "I'm in love with you, Willa. I know it's too soon and too fast, but I am. I'm in love with you." Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm in love with you too. Then come with me. Take the chance." She kissed him instead of answering, and they ended up in his old bedroom, the one that still had posters of cars on the walls and trophies from high school soccer on the shelves. They made love slowly, tenderly, like they had all the time in the world, even though they both knew he was leaving in 12 hours. Afterward, lying in his arms, Willa made her decision. "I'll come," she whispered. Zachary's arms tightened around her. "Really? Really? But I need a few weeks to wrap things up here. My project, my lease, I need to tell my mom in person. However long you need, I'll wait." The next morning, Willa watched Zachary's plane take off, feeling like her heart was flying away with him. Sophie stood beside her, having driven her to the airport. "You're really going to London?" Sophie asked. "I'm really going to London. I'm going to miss you so much. I'm going to miss you too." Willa hugged her friend tight. "But you can visit. Anytime." "Oh, I will. Someone needs to make sure my brother is treating you right." The next 3 weeks were chaos. Willa's boss was disappointed but understanding when she gave notice. Her landlord was less understanding about breaking her lease, but they worked it out. Telling her mother was the hardest part. London, her mom stared at her across the kitchen table. Willa, you barely know this man. I know him well enough to know I love him. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll come home. Mom, I have to try. What if he's the one and I let fear stop me from finding out? Her mother sighed but eventually pulled her into a hug. You've always been brave, braver than me. Just promise you'll be careful, I promise. Zachary called every day, sometimes twice a day. He sent her pictures of the apartment he'd been preparing for her arrival. A gorgeous loft in Shoreditch with exposed brick and huge windows. He asked about her favorite foods, her favorite colors, whether she preferred morning or evening light. He was building a home for her, and it made Willa fall even more in love with him. Finally, the day came. Sophie threw her a going-away party, and Willa cried more than she'd expected, saying goodbye to everyone. But excitement overpowered the sadness. She was starting an adventure. The flight to London felt endless. Willa watched movies she didn't absorb, tried to read and couldn't focus, and eventually gave up and just imagined what it would be like to see Zachary again. He was waiting at arrivals, holding flowers again, and the sight of him made everything real. Willa ran to him, letting him catch her and spin her around, not caring that they were making a scene. "You're here," he said against her hair. "I'm here." The apartment was even better in person. Zachary had stocked the fridge with her favorite foods, hung prints of American architecture on the walls, and somehow found peonies even though they were out of season. "It's perfect," Willa breathed, standing in the middle of the living room. "You're perfect." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I still can't believe you're really here. Believe it. You're stuck with me now." Those first few weeks were an adjustment. London was overwhelming, bigger and busier than anywhere Willa had lived. She got lost constantly, couldn't figure out the tube system, and missed American coffee desperately. But Zachary was patient, guiding her through it all, and slowly the city started to feel less foreign. She started looking for work, reaching out to restoration firms and architecture offices. The market was different than in the States, and several places told her they'd need to see her credentials verified. But eventually, she landed an interview with a prestigious firm that specialized in preserving Georgian and Victorian buildings. The interview went better than expected. The lead architect, a woman named Margaret Chen, was impressed by Willa's portfolio and her passion for historical preservation. They talked for over an hour about techniques and philosophies, and by the end, Margaret was offering her a position. "We have a project starting next month," Margaret said. "A Georgian townhouse in Bloomsbury that's been neglected for decades. I think you'd be perfect for it." Willa accepted on the spot. She called Zachary immediately, barely able to contain her excitement. "That's incredible," he said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "We should celebrate. Dinner tonight, anywhere you want. Actually, I was thinking we could cook together. I found this market yesterday that sells the most amazing vegetables. Whatever you want, love." Life fell into a rhythm. Willa threw herself into her new job, spending long hours at the Bloomsbury townhouse, carefully stripping away decades of bad renovations to reveal the original beauty underneath. The work was challenging and satisfying, and her team respected her opinions and expertise. Zachary's work kept him busy too, but they made time for each other. Weekend trips to Bath and Oxford, evenings at the theater, lazy Sunday mornings in bed with newspapers and coffee. They explored London together, finding hidden gardens and secret bookshops, building a life that felt uniquely theirs. Sophie visited after 3 months, and Willa showed her around the city with pride. "You're glowing," Sophie observed over afternoon tea. "I've never seen you this happy." "I am happy. Ridiculously, impossibly happy. And Zach, how is he?" "Amazing. He's everything I hoped he'd be and more." Willa paused. "I know you were worried, but Sophie, he's not the person you described. Or maybe he is with work, but with me, he's different. He's present and attentive and just genuinely wonderful." Sophie smiled. "I can see that. The way he looks at you, it's like you're his entire world. I'm really glad I was wrong about him. But not everything was perfect." 5 months into her time in London, Willa's mother called with news that her grandmother had fallen and broken her hip. She needed surgery and recovery would be long. "I need to go home," Willa told Zachary that night. "Of course, I'll come with you." "You don't have to. I want to." "Your family is important to you, which makes them important to me." They flew back to Pennsylvania together. Willa's mother was grateful for the support, and seeing Zachary with her grandmother, patient and kind as he helped her with physical therapy exercises, made Willa fall even more in love with him. They stayed for 2 weeks. It was strange being back, seeing how her old life felt like it belonged to someone else. She loved her mother and grandmother, but London was home now. Zachary was home. Her grandmother recovered slowly but surely, and finally they were able to fly back to London. Willa felt guilty for being relieved, but she missed their apartment, their life together. "Does it bother you?" Zachary asked on the plane. "That we're so far from your family sometimes, but I made the right choice. I don't regret coming with you for a single second." "Good. Because I have something to ask you." He pulled out a small velvet box, and Willa's heart stopped. "I was going to wait until we got home, do this properly with candles and music and a whole production, but I can't wait anymore." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "Willa Kennedy, will you marry me?" Willa was crying and laughing and nodding all at once. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and the elderly woman sitting across the aisle started clapping. Soon the whole section was applauding, and Willa hid her face in Zachary's shoulder, embarrassed and elated. "I love you so much," she said. "I love you too. Always." They planned a small wedding, just close family and friends. Sophie cried when Willa asked her to be maid of honor, and Zachary's father got misty-eyed giving a toast about how he'd never seen his son this happy. The ceremony took place in a small chapel in the Cotswolds, all honey-colored stone and stained glass windows. Willa wore a simple lace dress, and Zachary looked unfairly handsome in his tailored suit. When he said his vows, his voice cracked with emotion, and Willa had to wipe away tears to say hers. "I promise to love you in every city, in every country, in every adventure we have together," she said. "You showed me what it means to take a risk for love, and I would make that same choice 1,000 times over." Their honeymoon was 3 weeks in Italy, visiting old buildings and eating too much pasta and making love in hotel rooms with views of ancient cities. It was perfect. Back in London, they settled into married life. It was both different and exactly the same. They still had their routines, still worked long hours, but now there was an added depth, a sense of permanence that made everything feel more real. Willa's career flourished. The Bloomsbury Project was a massive success, written up in architecture journals and winning several preservation awards. She became known as someone who could bring dead buildings back to life, and offers started pouring in. She worked on a Victorian library, a medieval church, a row of Regency houses. Each project felt like a gift. Zachary's company continued to grow, but he made a conscious effort to maintain balance. He turned down trips that would keep him away too long, delegated more to his partners, and made sure he was home for dinner as often as possible. He'd learned that success meant nothing if he didn't have someone to share it with. 2 years into their marriage, Willa found out she was pregnant. She told Zachary over breakfast, just casually mentioning that they might need to convert the spare room into a nursery. He dropped his coffee mug. "Are you serious?" He was around the table in seconds, pulling her into his arms. "Very serious. About 12 weeks serious." He kissed her, long and deep, and when he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." They called their families immediately. Willa's mother cried happy tears. Sophie screamed so loud that Zachary had to hold the phone away from his ear. His parents started making plans to visit as soon as possible. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Willa felt enormous by the end. Zachary was devoted, rubbing her feet and making midnight runs for weird food combinations, and talking to her belly every night. "Your mom is the bravest person I know," he told their unborn child. "She took a chance on me, moved across an ocean, and built this incredible life. You're lucky to have her." "Stop making me cry," Willa said, wiping her eyes. "I'm hormonal enough already." Their daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. Willow Rose Emerson came into the world with a full head of dark hair and her father's eyes, and the moment Willa held her, she understood what people meant when they talked about love that changed everything. Zachary was a natural father, patient and gentle and completely smitten. He took paternity leave, something his partners were shocked by, and spent those weeks learning how to change diapers and soothe a crying baby and function on 2 hours of sleep. "I built a company worth billions," he said one night, walking the floor with Willow. "But this is the hardest thing I've ever done." "You're doing great," Willa assured him from the couch, where she was too tired to move. "We're doing great." Sophie visited when Willow was 3 months old, and watching her best friend hold her daughter made Willa emotional all over again. "She's perfect," Sophie said. "You guys made a perfect human." "We did pretty good," Willa agreed. "I'm proud of you for taking the risk, for building this life." "I was wrong to doubt it. You were looking out for me. That's what best friends do." As Willow grew, so did their family's adventures. They took her to Paris at 18 months, where she was fascinated by the Eiffel Tower. To Rome when she was 2, where she loved throwing coins in the Trevi Fountain. To New York at 3, where she declared the city too loud but loved the bagels. Willa continued her restoration work, though she scaled back her hours to spend more time with Willow. Zachary did the same, prioritizing family dinners and bedtime stories over late meetings. They'd both learned that success wasn't about money or achievements. It was about the life you built with the people you loved. When Willow was 4, Willa found out she was pregnant again. This time with twins. Twins. Zachary stared at the ultrasound screen. "Are you sure?" "Very sure," the technician said, smiling. "2 healthy heartbeats." "We're going to need a bigger place," Willa said. They moved to a house in Primrose Hill, a beautiful Victorian home that needed some restoration work. Willa oversaw the renovation herself, carefully preserving the original features while updating for modern family life. It was perfect. The twins, 2 boys they named William and Warren, were born on a snowy January day. Willow was ecstatic to be a big sister, though she was less thrilled about sharing attention. Life with 3 kids was chaotic. The house was always messy. Someone was always crying or laughing or both, and Willa couldn't remember the last time she'd slept through the night. But it was also full of joy. Dance parties in the kitchen. Family movie nights where everyone piled on the couch. Sunday morning pancake breakfasts where more food ended up on the floor than in mouths. Zachary's parents visited often, doting grandparents who spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly. Willa's mother moved to London when the twins were 2, wanting to be closer to her family. Sophie became Aunt Sophie, the cool aunt who brought inappropriate gifts and taught the kids British swear words when their parents weren't listening. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Willa back to Italy, just the 2 of them for a long weekend. It was strange being without the kids, but also wonderful to just be a couple again. "Can you believe it's been 10 years?" Willa asked over dinner in a small restaurant in Tuscany. "Feels like yesterday and also forever at the same time. Any regrets?" "Not a single one." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're still the best decision I've ever made. Even though I made you have twins, especially because you made me have twins." They made love that night like they were newlyweds, slow and passionate and deeply connected. In the morning, lying in bed with sun streaming through the windows, Willa thought about how far they'd come. She'd taken a massive risk, leaving everything familiar for a man she'd known 2 weeks. It could have been a disaster, but instead it had been the beginning of everything. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, running his fingers through her hair. "How lucky I am. How grateful I am that I said yes when you asked me to come to London. I'm the lucky one. You gave up everything for me." "I didn't give up anything. I gained everything." She kissed him softly. "You were worth the risk. You're always worth the risk." As they flew back to London, back to their kids and their home and their beautifully chaotic life, Willa reflected on how love could be. It could be dramatic and cinematic, yes, but it was also in the quiet moments. The shared glances across a dinner table. The way Zachary still brought her coffee in bed every morning. The fact that after 10 years, they could still talk for hours. She thought about that first night on the terrace at his parents' house, when she'd felt electricity just from shaking his hand. She'd fallen for her best friend's brother, never imagining it could become something this big, this real. The forbidden had become her future, and it was more than she ever could have dreamed. Willow ran to them when they arrived home, throwing herself into their arms. The twins toddled behind, shouting "Mama," "Dada," with pure joy. Willa's mother smiled from the doorway, happy to hand the chaos back to its rightful owners. That night, after the kids were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Willa and Zachary sat on their back patio, drinking wine and looking at the stars. "I love our life," Willa said simply. "So do I." Zachary pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Here's to the next 10 years. And the 10 after that, and all the years after those." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd taken a chance on love and won. The night was cool, but Willa felt warm, surrounded by everything she'd built. A career she was proud of. A home filled with love and laughter. 3 incredible children. And Zachary, always Zachary, the man who changed everything. She'd been terrified to move to London, to leave behind everything familiar. But fear had given way to courage, and courage had led her here. To this man, this life, this beautiful future they'd created together. "I'd do it all again," she whispered. "Do what? All of it. Every scary moment, every risk, every leap of faith. I'd do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." Zachary tilted her chin up, kissing her with the same passion he had on their first date, in his childhood bedroom on their wedding day. A kiss that held 10 years of love and the promise of countless more to come. "I love you, Willa Emerson. I love you too." The stars shone above them, witnesses to a love story that started with a dropped champagne flute and grew into something epic. Willa had fallen for her best friend's brother, the millionaire who'd seen her for exactly who she was. The forbidden had become her forever, and she wouldn't change a single thing. Their story wasn't over. There would be more adventures, more challenges, more moments of joy and fear and triumph. But they would face all of it together, just as they'd faced everything else. Because sometimes the biggest risks led to the greatest rewards. Sometimes falling for the wrong person turned out to be exactly right. And sometimes, when you were brave enough to say yes to love, it gave you everything you'd ever wanted and more than you'd ever imagined. Willa looked at her husband, at the home they'd built, at the life they'd created, and smiled. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. And that knowledge, that certainty, that deep, abiding love, was the best thing she'd ever known. The end was really just the beginning, over and over again, for the rest of their beautiful, messy, perfectly imperfect lives.